us. And the standing on the shoulders of giants, the team at the bottom, the Nethermind team. But we'll rush a bit. So when we look at 2018, many of you probably know this chart. It shows about how we were talking about Ethereum in the past. And why I'm showing that 2-year-old diagram is because in 2018, nobody mentioned DeFi yet. And decentralized finance appeared somewhere in 2019. But in 2018, I remember everybody was saying, oh, we need the stable coins. If we have stable coins, everything will open, like we will start building new things and so on. And as much as we all scared about decentralized finance, actually for me and to much extent for Nethermind as the company's mission, decentralized finance is what made us start, what made us attracted to Ethereum. To believe that decentralized finance is actually the cool thing and the future. And you know actually that it's growing and it's waiting for its crash and its failures, and it will be growing after failures, I believe. But this composable money, the money Lego of Ethereum, is something that's really promising. And something that many people are excited about, right? We were always excited about cryptocurrency tokens, about the contracts that do a bit more together when they work together. Not everyone, but many of us. And when I think about decentralized finance, why is it important to Nethermind? Because to much extent, this is our vision for the business. This is our mission. This is what excites us. This is what we build outside of the client. That's how we want the client to exist. And how is Nethermind important for DeFi, for decentralized finance, is because Nethermind is planned to be built with decentralized finance integrated. Coming back to the time from maybe like 2017 when Parity was starting to build the client with the UI, like the client that was a bit more than just the infrastructure processing. I think slowly we're getting there where it's again useful to start building the client that will be used, that will be integrated with the tools, that will be used by both users, business users, people who work with data, that many contracts and so on. Quickly, a few slides that will tell you a bit about Nethermind. So Nethermind is the Ethereum client. At the moment is number 3, which means that it has something like 0.25% market share in the running nodes. I'll tell a bit more about how exactly the ecosystem of nodes looks. The platforms, Windows, macOS, Linux, I always remind it because sometimes people hear the technology is .NET Core, so they remember the old .NET and they think Windows only, but no. It's all the platforms. We run most of our infrastructure on Linuxes. And we do work with lots of consensus algorithms. We support Aura, we support Click, we support ethash, which means mainnet, and we have something like, I don't know, the Playbox, Ganache style, NavDev, where you can just launch it quickly and run with Truffle. And that's for you to find it on Docker Hub, on downloads. And what we believe at Nethermind is that, that in the future, with the growing importance of decentralized finance, of the data on decentralized finance, of Ethereum as a platform, more and more big businesses will be actually running nodes on-premise. Why do I specifically think about it? I'm coming from the financial industry. I remember some buy-side businesses or banks that were very cautious about the cloud, and even as they transitioned much of their businesses to the cloud, there were always some critical operations for those businesses, like risk management, some critical pricing, some proprietary algorithms for trading. All of that was always running on-premise, and it was always hard-kept secret of those companies, and they paid a lot of money to make sure that it was operating properly, that it was managed properly. And I think that with the growing importance of Ethereum, this is what will happen to the nodes. Like in a few years, maybe, the financial businesses or, I don't know, fraud detection companies, data companies, and all these companies will be coming to all of us and asking us to establish infrastructure for them, more and more. They will all want to run their nodes. And you've seen that probably like a few months ago, there was an announcement from, I think, some agencies in the US. They were saying, oh, we are looking for the companies that will be maintaining nodes for us. So this is a big statement for us. That's where we go. And when we built Nethermind, we think like, we want to build a node that you wanted. We want to listen to the community and hear, actually, for you to bombard us with the ideas and pack a bit more than is needed there, but make it very solid and stable. And still introduction of Nethermind before we go further, the one super important thing for us that we paid attention to from the very early stages of development is performance. And when we talk about performance, it's a bit more than what you may think of at the beginning, like just the EVM processing and so on. So we look at many different things. We look at, okay, so transaction processing times in EVM, but also what's the latency from the time when the block arrives to us from the network to the moment when it actually exits the processing pipe of all transactions. What are the delays on block propagation to other nodes? How properly we filter the blocks that are arriving from other nodes? What's the response times for JSON RPC queries for the nodes that are extracting data? What's the startup time of the node? What's the time for the fast sync, full sync, and so on? Which is not only affected by the processing, but also how well you requesting data from other nodes. The configurations of database, the allocations of memory to avoid the .NET Word garbage collection, total memory usage. So we look at all those different elements to make sure that we deliver something that's really high class. And actually, I really like this picture to show it. It's a bit of metaphor for us is this, when I lost a turtle at my home, it's actually a picture of my turtle who found a way to the warmest place because he likes to sit in warm places. And he was sitting in my like mining rig that I was testing at that time. Not mining rig, but more like fun mining. It's here. Okay, I keep saying this is bias benchmark, it's selected benchmark by us, but it's the one that we used, and it's actually two clients working Docker to Docker between each other and synchronizing 1 million Gurley blocks. And 1 million Gurley blocks means that it's mostly empty blocks. Probably like 10–20% of those blocks are populated with true transactions. So very specific benchmark, but because we used it once in the past, I will show you how it progressed since that time. So the first time we run it, we were like much ahead. We were optimizing all this blocks retrieval, processing, and so on. And since that time, we've seen that actually Get made a lot of progress. We made a lot of progress as well, actually. And mostly Get caught up with parity, which is great. And all the clients made a lot of progress. But still, I hope that it shows, at least in some scenarios, how fast we can get with the Nethermind processing. So it went down to 8 minutes processing from one node to node to full archive synchronized 1 million blocks. Now, one thing that changed a lot recently was the stability of Nethermind. It improved a lot. So this is our Gurley validator, and it's like 2 days of Grafana running on 300 peers, practically almost never dropping peers apart from the situations when the peers were just leaving the network, with very stable memory, and we see that very consistently for the nodes running for many days. And obviously, when you think about any business cases, enterprise cases, or even hobbies cases, you don't want to restart a node a lot. You don't want the node to die, crash. So that's a lot of work that we put there. This is something I'll be showing in a moment. A cool thing that we've been working on recently, so the beam sync. I'll explain that a bit more in details. And again, a beam syncing mainnet node that is running with 200 peers that are not complaining about the way we do beam syncing. This is a stable climb to almost 1,000 peers. And in interesting knowledge about the network, each time I'm trying to get more than 1,000 peers, it feels that there is only 1,000 peers on the network that are supporting one of the two protocols, ETH62 or ETH63. So it means that probably out of the 7,000 nodes that we have, the remaining 6,000 are light clients or some other form of synced clients. Because I've never seen a single client. But even then, you think our single node at 4 GB of memory on mainnet is supporting 1/7 of the all network nodes in the world. This is Nethermind RPC showing around here, around the spikes of around 1 million requests per minute, almost 2 million requests per minute. And again, quite stable with, very stable with memory, with sync peers at the same time, and showing the consistent response times for the RPC. The block latencies. So here we have to say, okay, GET is fantastic here. We seem to be doing very, very well there. This is a good example from EthStats, the Mystic Ryujin, the guy who hobbystically runs a lot of nodes. And he runs GET, Parity, Nethermind. This is some of his setup of the machines on mainnet. And with 200 nodes connected, he receives something like 30 milliseconds delays on average behind the first node reporting on EthStats on the new block. And the other node here is his GET node, which is at 46 milliseconds. This is depending on the time of the day. Sometimes it will be worse on GETs that he's running, sometimes worse on Nethermind. But again, we're showing that we did care about latencies, and it might be very important if you're running the nodes and want to learn about new blocks very, very quickly. And this is more like the last chart to show you, which I think will show the opportunities for Ethereum to improve the network behavior. Almost 95%, I think, of traffic, or even more than 95% of traffic that we are seeing when recording the numbers of transactions of all the messages flowing on the network is transactions propagation. And this is something that will change massively after the ETH65 is widespread. So that's already changed in GET. GET team changed that. We'll follow up soon. And it means that probably maybe 80% of the traffic will disappear. So we keep talking about all the different synchronizations mechanisms in Ethereum and how we care about the traffic. But actually, the flow of transactions being repeated over and over again, the same transactions coming to us from many different nodes that we're connected, this should disappear soon. Okay, now I want to show the demo in this first part. So before I talk about beamsync, I would like to say that everything starts with the cool article from Jason Carver from the Trinity team about the idea of beam syncing. So the synchronizing the node in a way that will allow you within a few minutes to jump to the top of to head of the chain on mainnet and verify the latest blocks fully, verify all the transactions from the head of the chain. And just a quick reminder of something that very often is being mentioned, and I don't want to go too deep into that. The Ethereum chain, it just keeps growing with each block that adds some new nodes to the tree. And it's being over and over again being talked as a huge trouble of the growing state of Ethereum, and a lot of research is being done to make sure that it doesn't grow too fast, or maybe that we rebuild the structure of the tree to make it smaller. Nonetheless, what is important is that while we have something like 3 terabytes of state historically, the latest state is something like 35, 40 gigabytes. And when you fast syncing nodes, you only take this latest state snapshot, 40 gigabytes. When you full archive node, you rebuild the whole history and you have 4 terabytes of nodes. The problem is if you fast sync the nodes, you cannot ask about the past. If you full archive the nodes, you waste a lot of resources and time, and unless you're some kind of data analytics company, you don't want it. And beamsync is targeting the idea of being able to almost take nothing of that state, but whenever processing newest blocks, just taking whatever data is critically needed for that particular block to be executed. All right, so let's try the live demo. Now let's see if it works. Okay, so the first thing I would like to show you is, remember when you were seeing the times for the full archive sync for Girly, right? It was 8 minutes if you rushed it with Nethermind. It could be much longer. If you fast syncing, it's not much better, and you also end up with something Okay, so it was 8 minutes for 1 million blocks. And then the later blocks are actually very heavy because people started testing on Gerli the validators for Ethereum 2, which means that the blocks starting from around 1.6 million are very heavy on state, require a lot of processing, which means that probably even with Nethermind it would end up being like 1 hour of full archive synchronizing. And fast syncing also would make you end up with maybe 1.5 gigabyte of state. And you would wait a lot of time before you would just test your small things. And what I'll start here, first of all, something to just show you quickly what happens with the new blocks. I'll start Gerli archive node that I already had started before. Sorry. It's a problem with live demos. I forgot the wrong directory. Let me go to the right one. Center my state. Okay. All right, that's exactly what I needed. So I modified Nethermind a bit to display actually information about nodes being stored in the tree. Let me change the size of the font quickly for you. Okay, so as you see, after every single block, we have some changes to the tree done. Like here, we have a few hundred bytes. And because Gerli blocks that we are synchronizing here are some of the early blocks, which means that you only need something like 1 kilobyte of data to be able to fully verify the block. If you go on mainnet, this can end up being something like 0.5 megabyte of data that you have to download, and it's being scattered across a few thousand nodes that you cannot really retrieve at once. You have to go almost like one by one, parallelizing some of it. And it causes a lot of trouble because on mainnet you end up with something like 6 minutes processing time for a single block, which is 15 seconds in a beam syncing mode. If you want to just retrieve the particular parts of the tree that are needed for processing. And here, even for empty blocks, you practically have no state change. In the mainnet, every single block at least assigns the reward to the miner, so there is some state change always. That's negligible, but for the blocks with 200 transactions, heavy transactions, it's quite big. Now, quickly running away to something more interesting, let's actually launch a BeamSync Gerli. This one. And I'll start it with JSON RPC. And in a moment, we'll talk about how it can actually be used in some decentralized applications when you want to work with the nodes we found using Infura. Okay, so what happens now is this node actually starts from empty database. It's all in memory, so this node runs in memory on Gerli. It's just synchronized to the latest header. It's just processing transaction, and it just processed the latest block from Gerli. And this took like 15 seconds, and it's all in memory, and it takes no state storage, nothing. Now, if I launch another window, just launch CLI. Okay, so this is our CLI that we can use now for a quick presentation of what it means really that you have the whole whole block processed and the state required for the block. So if I look now at the block number of this chain, it shows me, okay, it's 2 million blocks, right? Reminding you that it was like 15 seconds of synchronization on Gerli. And now if I get one of those blocks, okay, so I found the latest block, and I'll get the transaction from this latest block. So I have a transaction hash of one of the transactions from the latest block. And what I can do now, I just trace it with parity. And I can also trace it, sorry, with parity. We have the parity style traces of Nethermind. So we just replicate the same style tracing, same format. And now if I think about the debug tracing of get, it looks like it will take a while because the debug trace is very detailed. So maybe wait. But again, I'll be able to trace the whole execution of virtual machine. Okay, it's responded after 4 seconds, and now it will take probably, okay, a few seconds to display it on the screen. So this is a full day virtual machine execution. So we do work on the light client as well as the less protocol implementation, but to my understanding and knowledge, BeamSync is the only sync at the moment that in such a quick time can show you actually the full execution of the transaction. So I cannot do that with the last protocol because it just extracts witnesses. And this is actually executing the whole block with the whole state for that particular block. And there is a research in Ethereum space to make sure that this information can be much easier obtained for the mainnet blocks, that all the nodes on the network will start publishing witnesses of the blocks. And the witness is nothing else than just this thing that I was talking about. So the data required for the block processing and nothing more than that. So each block has this witness, which is like half a megabyte, maybe sometimes less, depending on the format. Okay, so that was presentation for Gerli, and quickly I'll just try to repeat it for mainnet. I wasn't sure actually how good the internet will be here. We released the Gerli Beam version recently, like a month ago, so you can already download it and play with it. And we didn't release the mainnet version, but we have it. So here we have the node actually peering for a moment. I think the peering will take a bit longer here. Okay, it did get to the latest block. Now it's been processing the latest blocks on mainnet. All right, and we have the first transaction processed. So just quickly repeat the same steps that we've seen here. Okay. Just the thing is, because mainnet doesn't process the whole block yet, so we don't have yet the block information, but we have some of the transactions processed. So if you see the screen, some of the transactions of each of those blocks are processed in parallel. The interesting thing with BeamSync is that you can have many blocks and process them next to each other without waiting for the whole block to be processed, and it speeds up your ability to request data from the network. Okay, so I'll just type in the number here, 598, and let it be 241. So I get a block, and I'll quickly get the transaction of that block, and I'll do the same thing. I'll do the parity style tracing of the mainnet block. And again, this is mainnet. Normally, like fast syncing mainnet would take you 7 hours. Maybe the light client would take you very quick time, but wouldn't give you the full traces, not the same capability. And this took us maybe like, it really took us time because I was finding the commands rather than we were waiting for sync. It took maybe like 15 seconds to sync it, and now we are able to trace transactions. What's even more interesting is that, maybe I won't show that to save time, but you could actually ask about the state from the past. You can choose which header to synchronize from, and you can start making calls against the code from 1 month ago. So even the state that you didn't synchronize normally would be retrieved on demand. And there is still debate on how much of this functionality should be given to the normal users to ensure that the network is healthy. But when you think about the decentralized applications, what you would normally do, either you would synchronize the entire node, or maybe embed the light client, or most likely you would go to Infura. And the idea here is to go even more detailed with what we synchronize. So we can take the Ethereum node, synchronize beam sync, not the whole state of the latest block, but just synchronize your particular contract and start asking questions about that particular contract. And we were thinking about use cases like our data marketplace, as we'll talk about in a moment. We're thinking about the app node, maybe ENS or things like that. So you have a few contracts that you have to download data for. You can download all data or only on-demand requests and keep running an in-memory small node stateless client to serve all your requests from your decentralized application server. All right. We did slightly better, I think. I haven't had the screenshots in case it didn't go well. All right. So now why do we talk about decentralized finance? So with Nethermind, we want it to be integrated with more and more functionality for decentralized finance. One of the things that we keep building is data marketplace, but we also want to keep adding the ability for additional tracers and plugins so you can start operating the node in whatever, whether it's BeamSync or full archive, and integrate your tools for trade execution, for data analytics within the same set of processes. Like a family of processes that are enhancing each other's capabilities, load balancing, data extracting, and so on, and can support your decentralized finance needs. And idealistically, nowadays, we see decentralized finances. There's lots of those cool people, probably us. And there's fantastic projects like, I don't know, Aave, Flash Loans, Uniswap. And there is Ethereum. And that's how we do that. Like there's this like slow, very cool, very funny thing, right? Like games in the past. We were all humans gaming slowly, sending messages, and progressing with online gaming. The problem is that very soon when we start doing things that are actually so cool that are profitable, there is this like, we no longer talk to Ethereum really. We start talking to miners. And when we think about front running or this miner value extraction, I think this is what will happen, and it's unavoidable. And I even think that this is where we should target to go with the miner role. It's miner being a bit like arbitrager of the decentralized finance world. At least if we think we can avoid it, I'd love to discuss it. But I think miner will always be in a position that if they apply the proper tools, if they apply the proper analytics and proper execution, they should always front-run the transactions. Now we should discuss the situation when they properly done decentralized finance will actually give a very, very small arbitrage opportunities to miners, and it will mean that for every single block we'll have very quick adjustments of pricing. And only then probably we'll start running away from decentralized oracles from outside, and we'll build some kind of mechanisms like futures, exchanges, contracts in the traditional finance, which are providers of the insight into what the price is, right? You know, we keep thinking that the price of the Ethereum on-chain is something extremely hard to bring without the outside world. But when you think about the outside world, how do you start with the price of gold or dollar? I mean, it also exists only inherently in the system, in the financial system. It doesn't come from outside. There are lots and lots of sources of pricing that make it reliable. And if you have enough of those sources interconnected on-chain, then we should have equally reliable or unreliable system. And the idea is, I think, that through these integrated tools, we'll be providing more and more solutions for the arbitragers to actually be able to smoothen the financial system of Ethereum. And now, even worse, I mean, after some time, if it actually starts working smoothly, operating smoothly and fast, and brings the proper results and be actually a grown-up people toy, then there's no longer maybe this cool, funny people, us on the left, but there are actually companies, businesses that execute it. And we just rebuild some new fancy financial system, but hopefully much better than what we were experiencing in the past. Again, this is the vision for Nethermind as well, at least on this non-mainnet or maybe mainnet part, which is business, like decentralized finance. We do deliver nodes for people who love Ethereum. I will continue. The mainnet is the goal, and we also believe that mainnet will be the place for decentralized finance to happen, and all those private chains will sooner or later be negligible comparing to the value of the mainnet, even for the huge enterprises. Sooner or later it will happen. Cool. And for the last part, I would like to talk about two more things, if I have time: data marketplace in Nethermind and the Ethereum 2. So data marketplace is our solution to actually start this bigger ecosystem of data collection, execution, analytics for the businesses and miners running Nethermind. So let me check the time because we started much, much later. Okay. The data marketplace idea is that when you run the node, beam synced or full synced node, you actually have the capabilities to process many things by yourself. You can process the transaction execution, trade executions, flash loans, arbitrage, whatever. You can also start processing kind of payments between you and the providers of data. So not only you have to extract the data yourself, but you can also start to act as a part of a decentralized network that just exchanges the enhanced data. Idea that the data is extracted, enhanced, sold again, bought, combined, aggregated, sold with a value. So that added value ecosystem of traditional data providers can exist in a decentralized way and connect all those trading businesses, individuals, solo traders, funds, investing funds, and so on. And I can actually combine the data that they buy, and all this payment processing for buying the data is being done over Ethereum as well. And what we build is the idea that when you run the Nethermind node, it can act for you as the gateway to the network of nodes that are buying and selling data. And we kept it as simple as possible, which means that we didn't add any data provenance, any proving the data is valid, unaltered, and so on. But we deliver something that blockchain does quite well, actually, establishing secured, encrypted, one-to-one connections on the network and ability to discover the nodes on the network that are actually delivering data. So you connect your node, which is in your enterprise, just one single point to access the network of nodes delivering data. You connect to it your endpoints as being desktops of your colleagues, your traders, whatever, maybe your mobiles, your tablets, your laptops, whatever. They are connecting to that gateway. The gateway is processing payments and execution and flow of data, and it's exposing this data as proper valid streams and endpoints, whether it's gRPC, Kafka, or JSON RPC endpoints. And you can not only buy these streams of data, subscriptions, you can also buy API calls, and all of that is being paid for, monitored, and managed by the data marketplace system. I have a few screenshots for you from the system. This is an example of like management screen for the people in your organization that would buy some streams and establish them to be processed and forwarded to all the users. There are examples with like some big providers of data on the market, like Geico, CryptoCompare, various formats of data, various types of data, and you can buy those data, establish assets. We added the like inbuilt transaction processing, the basic hot wallet that barely holds value, cold wallets to separate all the, like if you can buy, but you can also sell data. If you sell data, you have cold wallet that contains your income and your revenue. It's never connected to our system. You process transactions, and normally, like we show that you can start consuming queries, but it's very technical. You would just run the gRPC or Kafka endpoint, and send to all your users in organization information about here you can listen for data. We take care of subscription, here is the data, and the data starts sticking, and all the payments are processed, and you can start discovering the centralized providers of the data. You don't have to go, like we do not really operate the marketplace. There's no login, there's no login with a key, nothing. You just download the system and it acts a bit as just a client of the peer-to-peer network. And the last thing is, in Nethermind recently we started working on the Ethereum 2. And there's actually a person that, in parallel to us, Ξ2DΦ, started working on the system called Cortex, also written in .NET Core. Very quickly we merged those two projects. It's done an amazing job on delivering a huge part of Ethereum 2 already. And I think this is something that we really care about, to make sure that the community is not worried that Ethereum 1 and Ethereum 2 diverge or not actually one system. I believe, analyzing all the research, that this is the common target of all the researchers in Ethereum 2, to make sure that actually they do behave in cooperation, they are consistent, that we do keep using Ethereum 1 as a payment and so on. But it's important for us to show that we'll be operating also as one brand, one client, that you will be able to use to both stake and validate and run it as a set of interconnected processes that are all familiar for your setup. All right, I touched a bit of different areas, so maybe now, if we have time.
Yeah, we have time for a short Q&A, no worries.
Yeah, yes, sorry, we have time for questions, right?
For Q&A, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
perfect. Okay, so. Yeah, if I can choose, I think that was the only hand up. So.
Yeah, go ahead. But
okay.
If you want to choose, like.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions, but maybe I just start with one. How does Beam Sync relate to light clients, or like existing light client protocols, and how does the security of Beam Sync look like? What are the considerations?
So I think it's known that we went a bit berserk with the approach to BeamSync, that we said, okay, we want to just deliver it and show how it works in this minimalistic form where it actually just synchronizes the last block. The whole idea of BeamSync, as described by Jason and the Trinity team, is that the moment you start BeamSyncing the latest blocks, you also synchronize in the background the full fast-sync state. And this is very different from the light client. The BeamSync tells you you can jumpstart the latest processing and have access to the latest blocks very, very quickly, but actually you retrieve the full state, which means that you sooner or later become a full node that can serve other nodes on the network, so you're repaying what you got by just retrieving the nodes. When we actually analyze just the latest header syncing, latest block syncing, I think that the amount of data flow is not much higher than the light client, but it doesn't actually include all of that overhead of the witness construction, like the redundant data and witness construction for various blocks in less client. It doesn't try to introduce this like a bit more complex incentivization and monitoring of nodes. So it's much simpler in a way, a bit more risky, but it's also not finished. So like we didn't deliver mainnet for anyone, but in those modes where it actually works just with one single contract, I think the amount of data is, I was analyzing the one beam syncing node consumes probably the similar amount of data of what the fast sync would do in 2 months or 3 months. So in the end, it's not very that heavy for the network, but it's still something that we're researching. As we, I say, not Nethermind team, but broader Ethereum 1x research team. Questions? Does it answer a question?
Oh, yeah, partially. I also have questions about Cortex, but let's take this offline.
Okay, are we good?
Yeah? Thank you so much.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
English is better. Can I need to send you a link?
I don't mind.